On the 12th day of November, 2025, 10 o'clock 00 in the morning local time, the United States military was tracking a cartel smuggling group that had just made a deadly mistake in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Their vessel was moving at the speed of 50 nautical miles per hour. A normal fishing boat only does about 12 nautical miles. These were not fishermen. They were fleeing and completely unaware that they had been detected 2 hours earlier. Inside the go-fast boat, the crew appeared confident. They had run this kind of shipment 18 times before. The same route, the same vessel, the same protection, paid to the right people. The driver kept checking the global positioning system right on schedule, right on course. Underneath green tarps sat a cargo worth 42 million United States dollars on the open market, to be split among 5 people after the cartel's cut. Each person would walk away with about $2 million, enough to disappear forever. 4 Mercury engines were operating at full power, pushing the craft across empty seas about 140 miles off the coast. There were no other ships in sight, only blue water and what they believed was freedom. But at an altitude of 25,000 feet, an HC-130J Super Hercules had been circling overhead since 6 o'clock in the morning, using the AN/APS 154 maritime surveillance radar, scanning a radius of 200 miles and tracking hundreds of surface targets. A radar operator had flagged this vessel at 8 o'clock in the morning. Its speed did not match the profile of a civilian boat. Its route diverged from normal shipping lanes. There was no automatic identification system signal. 3 anomalies enough to raise an alarm. The sensor operator on the Hercules switched to the electro-optical system, the Star Sapphire 380 HDC, and magnified the image from 140 miles away. Through the stabilized camera, he could count the engines, clearly see the tarps covering the hold, even make out crew moving on deck. By 9 o'clock 45, he noticed something important. The go-fast had stopped running in zigs and zags and was heading straight north. Either they had become overconfident or they had burned too much fuel. The tactical coordinator lifted a satellite phone and encrypted. "Kimball, this is Eyes 1. Target holding speed at 50. Recommend deploying interception forces." Data was transmitted over Link-16 to the operational center aboard the USCGC Kimball, then relayed to the Joint Interagency Task Force South based in Key West, where Drug Enforcement Administration personnel were monitoring the smuggling network. At that time, the USCGC Kimball was about 200 miles from the target, too far to pursue directly at its maximum speed of 28 nautical miles per hour. That, however, was not an issue. The math was clear. The small go-fast only had fuel for about 4 more hours at that speed. Meanwhile, an MH-65E helicopter could launch immediately, fly to cut them off, and contain the target, while the Kimball continued to close to handle the scene once the engagement concluded. The go-fast was heading north-northeast at 50 nautical miles per hour, likely toward a mothership or a rendezvous point ashore. That is classic cartel tradecraft. Run flat out during the day when visual detection is easier, but radar returns blend into legitimate traffic. This time, however, the smugglers had made a fatal error. They were operating inside the envelope of something designed precisely to handle those who run and do not stop. From a helicopter, striking a vessel's engine blocks while it is underway seems nearly impossible, but with the Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron of the United States Coast Guard, they had done it more than 500 times before. And today could be the 501st. The MH-65E Dolphin on this mission lifted from the deck of the USCGC Kimball at 11 o'clock in the morning. It was fitted with twin turbomecha Ariel 2C2-CG engines, each producing 853 shaft horsepower, giving the helicopter speed and stability even in strong winds. Unlike the search and rescue variants the public commonly sees, this Dolphin had been specially modified for counter-narcotics and high-speed interception missions. The pilot banked sharply toward the intercept and climbed to 3,000 feet, an altitude ideal for maximum fuel efficiency. After about 20 minutes from takeoff, the co-pilot spotted the fleeing go-fast. Behind it trailed a white wake nearly half a mile long. All 4 outboard engines roared at full tilt, throwing a white spray like a giant chalk line across the ocean visible from miles away. From roughly 3 miles out, that wake looked like a single long straight line drawn on the sea. The smugglers continued to execute zigzag maneuvers designed to confuse surveillance, entirely unaware that they had been tracked continuously for over 2 hours. This movement tactic is a classic entry in the Cartel playbook. Every 3 to 5 minutes, change bearing. Never steam straight for too long to avoid being geometrically boxed in. For surface ships, this usually works, forcing patrol craft to maneuver and burn more fuel. For helicopters, however, it is a different story. Helicopters operate in 3 dimensions, while the smugglers can only steer left or right. The MH-65E flew along straight lines between intercept points, cutting across distances the smugglers' vessel could never match. Inside the go-fast, the smugglers were likely recalculating. Their 4 Mercury 300 engines consumed about 25 gallons of fuel per hour for each engine at full throttle. The fuel tank held roughly 400 gallons. They had been running continuously for 2 hours, meaning 200 gallons were already gone. That left just enough for 2 more hours, maybe less, because the boat was heavily loaded with contraband. The rendezvous point with the mothership was still about 3 hours away if they maintained current speed. Clearly, someone had miscalculated, or they had burned more fuel than expected during the initial burst. Either way, physics was turning against them. Fuel was dwindling, and the distance remained too great. Meanwhile, the MH-65E helicopter could stay airborne for up to 4 hours and even refuel directly on the gimbal if needed. At this point, it was no longer a chase. It was an ending unfolding slowly but inevitably. The pilot could afford patience. The smugglers could not. The helicopter dropped to 500 feet and approached from the go-fast stern, keeping a distance of 500 meters. This angle of approach kept them outside the effective range of small arms, while providing an optimal firing position for what was about to happen next. The pilot adjusted speed to match the go-fast and began the compliance phase of the Coast Guard's intercept procedure. It was time for technology to speak. The co-pilot activated the long-range acoustic device LRAD, capable of broadcasting commands clearly at 162 decibels. That volume is louder than a rocket launch at close range. They broadcast in both English and Spanish. Stop your vessel. Prepare to be boarded. This is the United States Coast Guard. Rotor wash from the helicopter created a localized storm around the go-fast. Water sprayed everywhere, chaos churning. Yet the smugglers did not even slow down. Their decision was simple. 5 men, 2,800 pounds of narcotics worth 42 million United States dollars at street value, and the prospect of each facing 20 years in prison. Surrender meant guaranteed conviction. Running meant a slim chance of escape if they could reach shallow waters or friendly territory. They took those odds, unaware that the helicopter above had dealt with dozens just like them before. 15 minutes of warnings, visual signals, and sirens brought no compliance. The pilot contacted the gimbal, requesting permission to fire warning shots. Authorization came back immediately. Rules of engagement were clear for vessels refusing to stop in international waters. The gunner prepared the M240B machine gun, mounted on the side capable of firing 650 rounds per minute. The first burst thundered as a warning, accompanied by flashes and waterspouts erupting just meters ahead of the bow. The M240B roared a metallic hammering sound any combat veteran would recognize. This was no longer a warning. This was serious. Usually, by this point, most smugglers would stop, but not these ones. They were either more desperate or more foolish than the rest. Instead of slowing down, they pushed the throttles to the limit. The 4 Mercury engines screamed at redline, propellers shredding the water into white foam as the vessel veered left and right, trying to break the helicopter's aim. That tactic might work against a fixed-wing aircraft, but against a helicopter which can pivot almost instantly in mid-air, every evasive maneuver was little more than a futile dance over the ocean. After 3 volleys of warning fire, It was clear the smugglers had chosen the hard way. The pilot reported, "Target non-compliant." The response came immediately. "Authorized." The gunner ceased using the M240B and switched to a far more precise weapon, the Barrett M107 semi-automatic rifle, chambered in .50 BMG. This was more than a change of weapon. It was a shift from negotiation to neutralization. The gunner belonged to the Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron HITRON, based in Jacksonville, the world's only airborne law enforcement unit authorized to employ deadly force in such circumstances. HITRON is an elite force leading the fight against maritime smuggling. Since 1998, they have conducted over 500 interdictions, seizing roughly $6.7 billion United States dollars worth of narcotics from cartel supply chains. These are not ordinary Coast Guard aviators. They are intensively trained to disable engines of fleeing vessels from moving helicopters under real sea conditions, amid turbulence and harsh weather. Selection for HITRON begins with the top 1% of Coast Guard marksmen. Then the challenge intensifies. Candidates undergo months of training at the Maritime Security Response Team facility, practicing live fire from moving platforms at sea state 4 waves about 6 feet high, winds around 20 knots. They learn to read wave patterns, anticipate the sea's rhythm, and synchronize breathing with the helicopter's motion. A single training cycle expends about 5,000 rounds per shooter. The physics they must master are unforgiving. The helicopter moves at 50 knots along 3 axes: pitch, roll, and yaw, while the target moves at 50 knots in another direction. Ocean swells add vertical motion to both platforms. Wind deflects bullets. Engine vibration shifts aim, and salt spray clouds optics. Every variable must be compensated by skill and experience. Most military snipers fire from stable ground at stationary targets. HITRON gunners do not. Why aim for the engines? Because sinking the vessel would destroy evidence and create a maritime emergency, while a boat without propulsion becomes a floating crime scene, ready for boarding. Engines are also the largest and most fragile targets, aluminum blocks filled with precision components that shatter instantly under anti-material fire. One bullet, one engine without exception. The Barrett M107 rifle weighs about 30 pounds, or 13.6 kilograms. Each cartridge weighs 42 grams, leaving the barrel at a velocity of 853 meters per second, carrying more than 11,000 foot-pounds of energy. For comparison, that amount of energy is enough to penetrate roughly 2.5 centimeters of steel at a distance of 500 meters. Outboard engine blocks are typically made of aluminum, which against such rounds are practically as thin as paper. The helicopter's targeting system includes an EOTech 553 holographic sight paired with an AN-PEQ-2 infrared laser designator. The sight projects a virtual image at infinity, allowing the shooter to keep both eyes open while tracking the target. But at such ranges and under such conditions, technology is only a tool. The real weapon is the shooter's experience, more than 200 interdictions, thousands of training rounds, and the muscle memory to compensate for the simultaneous motion of helicopter, target, and sea. The first .50 caliber round struck the starboard outboard engine. The Mercury Verado 300 did not just stop, it exploded. Aluminum fragments and oil burst out in a black cloud as internal components were torn apart. The go-fast speed immediately dropped from 50 to 38 nautical miles per hour. Perhaps the smugglers hoped the remaining 3 engines would be enough to escape, but that hope vanished with the second shot. The port side outboard engine was hit mid-housing, severing the fuel line and damaging the water pump. The engine seized within seconds. Speed now fell to 25 nautical miles per hour, the boat beginning to sway with the waves, losing all agility. The third shot was almost artistic. The marksman had found a moment of stillness, where helicopter movement, target motion, wind, and trigger squeeze converged into one. The bullet punched through the lower gearbox of the inner starboard engine, exiting through the powerhead and carrying most of its internals away. The boat now limped at 12 nautical miles per hour, barely enough to hold course. One engine struggling to push a hull designed for 4. The fourth and final shot ended all hope of escape. The last Mercury engine detonated in a burst of metal and oil, the .50 round converting kinetic energy into total mechanical destruction. The Go-Fast went from barely moving to dead in the water within seconds. No engines, no options, no place to run. The smugglers were likely wondering whether a federal prison might be more comfortable than swimming 200 miles to shore. Meanwhile, the helicopter held overwatch as the USCGC Kimball launched its welcoming committee. Two rigid-hulled inflatable boats, RHIBs 7 meters long, were lowered into the sea, each carrying 6 maritime special operators from the Tactical Law Enforcement Team South, or TACLET South. These were not ordinary patrolmen. They were maritime commandos, trained for opposed boardings in hostile environments, which was exactly what this was. The two RHIBs advanced in a textbook pincer maneuver, their 470 horsepower diesel engines propelling them across the waves at 45 nautical miles per hour. Each boat carried TACLET South operators in level 4 buoyant body armor, armed with M4A1 carbines fitted with EO tech sights, and equipped with enough less lethal options to handle any level of resistance. The lead RHIB would conduct the initial approach, while the second provided covering fire. The first closed in at an oblique angle from the Go-Fast's stern, its coxswain maintaining perfect distance despite heavy swell. When only 10 meters remained, the lead operator stood up in the bow, drew his Beretta M9 pistol, and aimed directly at the smugglers. A 9mm pistol might not look intimidating, but being on the receiving end sends a message clearer than any English-Spanish dictionary. Orders erupted sharply in Spanish, cutting through rotor wash and engine noise, the universal language of maritime interdiction. Manos arriba, nadie se mueva, de rodillas, hands up, do not move, on your knees. The 5 smugglers froze among the tarps covering their cargo. The second RHIB swung around to the starboard side, 6 more guns, 6 more operators, 12 weapons, aimed at 5 criminals rapidly regretting their career choice. They shuffled toward the bow, hands raised, then lay face down on the deck. But these 5 men were not the only problem to resolve that day. Their vessel, now a stateless ship under international maritime law, was about to receive a Viking-style funeral of its own. The disposal team spread accelerant across the deck and hull, likely the same fuel used to power the RHIBs. Then, with less ceremony than lighting the Olympic torch, one operator tossed a flare onto the boat. The moment it touched the deck, the Go-Fast became the most expensive bonfire in the world. The team watched it burn for hours, and only after the vessel slipped beneath the waves did they Uber their guests and evidence back to the nearest United States port for processing. Thank you for watching.